G'day, Randy here. Welcome to the second part in my two-part series on Washington's Army, rule set for refighting battles of the American War of Independence. In part one, we covered the game setup. These rules are not like your typical rules where you just make an army and decide a scenario on the day. Your setup governs your scenario, and I think it enables you to make tactical decisions before you get to the tabletop. Of course, that's just my thoughts on it. If you go back and watch that, you'll get a better understanding of what's on the table and why it is, where it is, and what's missing off the table. A quick recap, the Americans are the defenders, and they've actually lost a few troops to desertion on the way to the battlefield. They've also got 3 units turning up late and they're in the reserve pool. The British, for their part, they've launched a flanking attack, and the Americans are also doing the same. But due to campaign twists and turns, some of the British flanking force has been diverted and is actually going to come into the reserve pool and come on their side of the table. So their flanking force has been cut in half in size. So a myriad of other things occurred during the setup, but I won't go over everything. I recommend you just go back and check out the video. Today is all about the game, so I'm going to leap straight into it and run through the game and hopefully highlight a few rules on the way, so you can, if you watch both videos, you'll get a good feel for these rules and be able to form an opinion. So not too much happened of significance on the British turn. Of course, the Central Brigade couldn't get its act together for the first turn due to campaign events. The brigade commander moved across to the CNC, and they're having a bit of chat about sorting that out. The cavalry on their right only scored 1 pip, only got 1 move, so they just moved up quietly, trying to stay out of range of the rifles on the opposite side of the pitch. And the left-hand brigade commander was really where the only action is. The 64th, right out on the flanks, is moved forward. The guns took a shot at the militia in the woods. They got 1 hit, but open order troops ignore the first hit in any round, so they ignored that, and then the commander ordered the 46th to expand out into a wider formation and move forward. They've got 1 pip left, which they're going to use to fire at the militia in the woods, just outside 6 inches, so it's at long range. 5s or 6s to hit. They get 1 hit. The militia can ignore the first hit, but they've already done that, so they've got to make a save. Anything but a 1, and they saved it. So the British can now roll to see if they can get reserves on, and they've got the 1 unit that was put into the reserve from the flank march, and they're going to try and bring it on this side of the table as well. So they need a 5 or a 6, and they succeed. So these lads turn up, and next turn they'll get a free activation. The last thing to do in the attacking turn is roll for flankers. We're going to roll a number of dice and see who gets to advance closer to coming on the table. So you start with 5 dice. You add 3 dice for a unit that's larger than 4 bases, so the British get 3 dice there, and they have an excellent commander, so they get another 3 dice. Of course, they lost that 1 unit, so that shrunk down their force. The Americans start with 5. They get 3 dice for their regular unit. They get 1 dice for their smaller cavalry unit, and 1 dice because they have a poor commander. So we roll these looking for successes. So there's our end result. The Americans got 4 successes, the British got 2, so that's a difference of 2. So the Americans add 2 more flanking chits to their count. So they are now on 3 chits. They need 9 to come on the table and drive the British back into their own reserve. So a good result for the Americans there. Right, moving into the American turn on the left, they didn't do much at all. The militia just stayed behind the fence, wary of the cavalry. The guns opened up on the Hessians coming up the road. They got 4 shots in. They missed completely with all of them, so they used their extra ammo to re-roll their dice, and they came up with 3 hits. But because it's at long range, the British managed to save all those. They checked to see if they'd burnt off their extra ammo, and they hadn't, so that's good news. Good news and bad news, really. In the centre, the commanders come forward a bit to make it easier to activate his troops. The general tried to give his commander orders, and the way you do that is you take the quality of the 2 generals and you add them together, and then for every 4.5 inches they're apart, you add another point. So they're both poor commanders 3. So every pip on the dice over 6 would give this commander a re-roll. Unfortunately, he only managed to roll a 4, so they just dribbled on each other's boots, really. The guns fired at the Queen's Rangers. They managed to get a hit, but the Queen's Rangers on the hill are in open order, so they can shrug off the first hit, so that was non-effectual. This guy's now going to try and activate the militia. He's a 3 and they're a 2, so that's 5, and they're within 4.5 inches, so he just needs a 5 or better for them to activate. And he's going to roll a cocked dice. He gets 6, so they do. Now they check to see how many pips they get. They get 1 pip. Lovely. If he had managed to give them some re-rolls, they could re-roll this dice, but he didn't. It's the blind leading the blind there. 1 pip is enough to give them a shot, and they'll take a shot at the British guns. You can see there. There's 6 stands, so 6 dice. 5s or 6s to hit. They're at long range. Well, that's quite a good roll, though. They've got 4 hits there, and because they're average troops, they can re-roll 2s and 1s, so they can re-roll this 1. No, so they've got 4 hits. So normal saves are 3 up, but the British gun is at long range, so anything but 1s. And they failed 1, so the British gun will take some damage. Beginning to think I've exposed that gun a little bit too much there. So the British gun has some powder on fire. Right, let's move over to the American right flank. Here's our brigade commander here. He's excellent, so he's a 1. He can activate this unit and this unit under his command. The thing with activating and commanders in this game is you've got to be very careful of their positioning. So because once they fail to activate, that's them for the brigade. So if I was to choose these guys first, because they're quite a distance away, it'd be 1, they're 2, so that makes it 3, and they're probably over 9 inches there, so that's going to add another 2, and they're also in the woods, so that's going to add another 2, so that's getting them up to a 7 or better on the dice. So whereas here, he's 1 and they're 2, that's just a 3. So we'll go with these guys first. And yes, they're fine. So they've activated. We roll to see how many pips they get. They get 4 pips. So I think they're going to choose to leg it down this way because there's a pack of British. The 64th is moving up to threaten the flank there. So they're going to turn about for 1. All manoeuvres must be done at the start of the move. So that's cost them 1 pip. Now, movement in this game is in increments of 4.5 inches. The narrower your formation, the more of those you can make. So 1 wide column can move 4 times, 2 wide can move 3 times, and anything wider than 2 can only move twice. These guys are obviously 2 wide, so they can move 3 times. So they're going to race down the road to here, behind the forest. The next thing we're going to do is try and activate these guys. as I said, 2 for average, 1 for him is 3, 2 for the distance, makes it 5, and 2 for block line of sight, makes it 7. So he needs a 7, and he gets an 8. So they're fine. So they're going to get 4 pips. So I think they're going to shoot, because why wouldn't you? So there's 4 bases in the front rank. So that's 4 dice. So that's going to cost them 1 pip to shoot the first time. If the British were within short range, which is 6 inches, they could opportunity fire first, but they're not. They're just outside. So it's long range, 5s or 6s. That's a bit of a rubbish roll, but they can re-roll 2s and 1s because they're average, and they get 1 hit. So the British need to save that. Normally on 3s, long range makes it anything but a 1. So they save that fine. Now, you can fire twice, but it costs you 2 pips to fire the next time, so it would leave them 1 pip left. So they're going to fire again. They can re-roll the 2. There you go, 4 hits. That's going to hurt. So the British save everything on anything but a 1. And they got 1 hit, so that's a casualty. Casualties in this game are half bases, so you get 2 casualties, you take a base off. You also place down a casualty marker for being hit, and that makes you morale check in the beginning of the next phase. So that's the end of the American turn. They've got reinforcements to roll for, and they're going to choose to try and obviously bring something on this flank to counter the big British push. So no road here, so 5 or 6. No. So they can keep choosing reinforcement battalions until they either get one on or they run out. So they'll try for the centre and try and move their French into the centre. There's a road there, so it's 4, 5 or 6. Yep. So the French unit will come on. Last thing to do in the turn is to reduce the time clock. And that's going to go down by 1. So from 21 turns, we're down to 20. Right, at the start of the turn, you always check morale, and we had the 46 outside the woods. They took 1 casualty, so they made 1 dice roll, and they passed, so they're fine. Then we moved commanders. The commander on the left, on the hill with the sweeping lady, he wanted to move up to help his troops get closer to ease his command burden, but he only rolled 3 1s, the tosser, and only moved 4.5 inches, so he's got a lame horse or something. We're crossing over to the middle now, and the CNC decided to help this guy. He rolled an 8. You take away the 3 points, 2 for him, 1 for him, and he gets this lad gets 5 re-rolls now. So he's going to choose to activate a few things. I think he'll go with the Queen's Rangers first. So he needs anything 4 or above, and he just gets it. They're going to roll for pips, and they get 1. Well, there's our first re-roll. We'll re-roll that, buddy. That's better. They'll get 5. So I think for 5, we've got some issues with space. So we'll contract in for 1, and we'll double move forward. This is difficult terrain, but because they're in open order, it doesn't cost them extra pip to move there. These spaces, when you're in open order, have to be arranged in the front rank. So that's cost them another 2, leaving them with just 2 left. And so they can squeeze off a shot. They can't get a second shot in because they need 3 pips for that. 1 for the first one and 2 for the second. So that's 4 shots at the American. We'll shoot at the gun. So they get 2 hits. They won't use their extra ammo. The gun will get 2 rolls, anything but a 1, and they're fine. Next, we'll activate the British gun. 3, that doesn't need to be issued an order, activates automatically, but I think we're going to risk it and re-roll that. See if we can't get a higher number there. No, should have sat with that. Teach me for being greedy. They get 1 shot. It's no point shooting at the militia because even if they hit, because they're in open order, they disregard the first hit. So we'll move on and activate the grenadiers now. Yep, and we'll see how many pips they get. 4. They will just move twice and come up behind the Queen's Rangers in support. So the last unit they've got is the Hessians on the other side of the farmyard. So 2 for the Hessians, 2 for the commander, 2 for block line of sight, and 2 for the distance. So he needs 8 or better. And he gets a 9. Well done. And they get 6 pips, so they clearly know what they're doing. So they're in a 2 wide, so they can move up to 3 times. So I think they're going to race forward. Okay, so over on the British right, the cavalry just moved into the trees. They rolled 6, so they used their pips to dismount, wheel, and move forward into the trees. Right, let's take a look at the British left flank. What I'm calling the 37th for the game, even though they're a bunch of converged light troops, they're going to roll 1 pip. Fantastic. So I think what they're going to do is just expand out into a bit more of an open line formation. Now we have our captain, and I think he's going to activate the gun to shoot at the infantry. He only gets 2 shots. He only hits with 1, but he'll take that because they'll ignore the first hit, which means that any hits these guys do can't be shrugged off automatically. So let's try and activate these. He's going to need 5, and he rolls a 3. Well, that's a disaster. That's a disaster. So I think they're going to stay put and fire because they wanted to go in with a bayonet, but they can't this turn. They roll horrendous. You get to re-roll. Nothing. All we've got left is the 64th. He can't be activated because Chappie here failed there, so they still get a residual single pip. So I think what they'll do is they'll expand out into a wider formation. Right, time for flank attack rolls. It seems the Americans have got the measure of the British here, because even though they're getting less dice, they're still winning the flank rolls. That's a win by 1, so they add 1 more to their pool, so they're up to 4 now, nearly halfway there. Right, we're into the Americans' turn 2. No morale checks for them. They didn't suffer any casualties. It's moved commanders. I think the only commander they've got to move is their guy on the right, and he wants to move round to follow up his troops that are going around the back of the hill. We'll activate in the centre. The general here will see if he can give this guy any re-roll dice. He's rolled a 7, and they're both 3s, so you take away the 6, he gets 1 re-roll. One's better than none, so we won't complain. The militia will open up at the guns. The guns are actually in close range, so I think they'll choose to opportunity fire beforehand, but they are damaged, so they're only going to get 1 dice. And they do hit though. Normally they would shrug it off, but they've already shrugged off a hit this turn, so they have to take it on the nose. So it's a 3-up save, and they don't save it, so they're going to take a casualty. So it's a half base loss. Once you get 2 casualties, you take a base off. Now they take a morale marker for taking a casualty, and they take a second morale marker for being hit by artillery. So that'll be a 2 dice morale check at the beginning of the next turn. General's going to try and activate the militia. He needs 5 or better. He does. They'll roll for pips. They'll get 5, so they're going to crack 2. They'll crack 1 shot at the guns and 1 shot at the Queen's Rangers, I think. We'll try the guns first. Well, that's a hand of rubbish, but they get to re-roll 2s and 1s. But I think they'll use their powder and re-roll everything. So they get 2 hits there, re-roll the 1. They get 3 hits. Is their powder burnt off? No, it's not. So 3 hits on the guns. Anything but a 1 saves it. So they saved all of them. So I think they'll spend another 2 pips and fire another round at the guns. Again, that's a handful of rubbish, but I think they'll just re-roll the 2s and 1s. They won't use their extra powder this time. So they get 2 hits. Can the guns save them again? Yes, they can. So now we'll activate the cannon, the Queen's Rangers. 4, that gives them 4 shots. That's pretty good. 3 hits. They're behind cover. They can ignore the first hit because they're in open order, so they get 2 saving rolls. And they failed 1 of them, so they're going to take a casualty. So they take a half base casualty. They also take a morale check for being hit or taking a casualty, and they take a second one because it was from artillery. Right, the last thing we have to do is American left flank. General's going to activate the guns. He's going to get 2 pips. So they'll crack a couple of shots into the Hessians as they come down the street, and they'll completely miss, but they'll use their extra powder to fire again, and they missed again, and they've still got the powder there. So last he'll attempt to activate these. He's a 2, they're a 2, so he needs 4 or better, and he gets just enough, and they are going to get 1 pip. So I think they're just going to cross the fence line. The cavalry's not about, they're going to come forward and engage those horsemen in the woods. Last thing the Americans have got to do is roll for reserves, and you can see they've managed to get their battalion on right by the corn patch there, and they rolled to reduce the time clock, and they rolled a 2, so it goes down to 18. Right, at the start of the British turn, they had to check morale on the Queen's Rangers. They passed, and so those chits come off. The next step is to move commanders. So this guy trottled up on the hill. He's trying to get a delicate balance to be able to activate all these 3 units. The CNC decided to gallop over and try and give him some re-rolls. He rolled the big 19-inch move, so he did quite well. And then our central brigade commander just moved up so he can have line of sight to the Hessians and hopefully get the centre moving. They want to push past and take the pressure off the guns that have been hit. I think the first thing we've got to do is see if this lad here can give this guy any re-rolls. He's 2 units apart, so that's 2, plus 1 for his command and 2 for him. It gets them to 5, and he rolls a 4. You sausage farmer. So he's not going to get any re-rolls this turn. Let's take a look at the action in the centre. Opportunity fire's kicked in, but no one's within short range. These guys are just out of arc. Well, I tell a lie, because this gun is in opportunity range and so is this gun. So the Americans, they can open up now, or they can choose to wait to see if the units come forward or anything. I think they're going to choose to wait, because obviously the British will be coming forward. So this commander is going to activate the Queen's Rangers, and he does on a 7, and they get 1 pip. Well, that's a bugger. So I think they're going to have to stand in place and shoot. That's all they can do. 4 dice. Yep, 4 dice. Re-rolling 2s. Well, that's a rubbish roll. They've hit the gun once. Can the gun save it? Yes, it can. So that didn't do much at all. The artillery will open up at the militia. No, only get 1 pip. So they've got 1 shot. They hit, but the militia can ignore it because it's their first hit. So that's a disastrous round of shooting. So he's got problems because the grenadiers can't really do much. He's going to try the Hessians. He activates them. They get 3 pips. Well, they're not going to have enough to get into assault, because they need 1 to wheel, 1 to move in, and 2 for the falter test. So all they're going to do is wheel slightly to get ready to assault the village. So the centre turned out to be a bigger non-event for the British. These guns will opportunity shoot. They're at short range, but not at canister range, or they're at medium range, so they get 2 dice. They get 1 hit, but these guys can ignore it. This gun over here will also opportunity shoot, and that's rolled double 1s. I think it will use its powder to re-roll. Gets 1 hit. The British can't save it, or the Hessians can't save it, and they don't burn off their powder. So the Hessians take a casualty, and they take 2 casualty markers, 1 for the casualty and 1 for being hit by artillery. So now the militia have to make up their minds where they're going to stand and fight. I've made a bit of a tactical blunder. I should have moved this infantry up in support, because when they get a falter test, they get to add 2 to their dice if they've got 2 units within 9 inches, which would have been really handy for the British, but they haven't got that. I've actually ran through a game before, and I made a few mistakes, so I reset and went again, and I found that the militia can choose to run, but sometimes when they run, they don't stop running. So I might continue in the line of tactical blunders and say that they're going to stand. So both units now make a falter test. So that's, well, rolling 2d6 and applying modifiers. So yeah, I should have run. Of course I should have. Of course I should have run. So the British had 2 because they're non-disordered line units. They had another 2 because it's the first assault of the game. There you go. So they've won by more than 5. So this unit immediately routs and is removed from the table. And then any unit within 9 inches of them, must take a morale test. So these guys had to do a morale check. They rolled 4 dice, 2 for seeing the unit destroyed, and 2 for because they had 2 markers. Any 4s and above a fail, they rolled just 1 fail, which means they're steady and they can't move next turn. So well done to them. We've still got time for a few more tactical blunders on this side of the pitch. This gentleman's trying to activate the 64th, and he's not going to. He's going to fail. So there you go. I did indeed have more time for more mistakes on that side of the pitch. So all remaining troops will only get 1 residual movement. So these guys will come forward. Just 1 move. And these guys also will come forward. The guns can still activate. And they'll get a 5. So they'll crack off 4 rounds at long range at that single column over there. They'll get 1 hit. And they'll save it. Right, last thing the British have to do in their phase is roll for the flanking marches. And you can see, despite having more dice than the Americans, they've done horribly again, and the Americans have actually picked up 3 chits this time. So they are at a total of 7. They're just 2 away from bringing their flank march on. Okay, let's crack into American turn. So this guy's going to try and activate these guys. He does. And they'll get 3 pips. So that'll give them 2 rounds of shooting, and they really want to take out their gun. So and the powder's gone. So the last thing the Central American Brigade commander got to do was try and activate these guys. And then he chose to fire at these, but the Hessians are within close range, so they opportunity fired first. They only got 2 stands, but they rolled double 6s. And these guys failed one of those. And so they took half base casualty, and they've got a casualty marker there. They returned fire, and they needed 6s because they're outside the central 2 bands of the firer, so they needed 6s to hit. They actually got 3 6s, and the Hessians failed to save one of those, so they ended up taking a whole stand off, and they've now got 3 casualty markers. So I think what the Americans will do will try and add to the pain and shoot the gun at them now. So we'll see how many pips the gun gets. It gets 2, so it's going to crack 2 rounds into them, and it does 2 hits. My word. Can the Hessians save that? They can't save one of them, so they're going to take another 2 markers, 1 for the loss and 1 for being hit by artillery, and their stand goes back on. I actually think they only count their hit by artillery once. So the American commander here, with his last unit, wheeled them around and shot into the unit hiding in the trees, the 16th Dragoons. They got 3 hits, and the Dragoons were saving on anything but a 1, but of course they rolled double 1s, so they took a base off, and they've taken 2 casualty markers. So the last thing the Americans have got to do is try and bring on their last reserve, which is coming on here, and they've failed to do that. Then they roll for the time clock, and they've rolled 4. So we're down to 14 points on the time clock now. So over to the British turn 4, as you see, they've got a few morale chits out there, so they're going to have to test here. They've got to roll 4 dice. They don't want any 4s up. And of course, they've failed that 3 times. That's going to be bad. So they've got to retreat. These markers now come off. And they roll for losses. And they've got to roll 3 dice. And they lose another half stand, so it's another full base off. So they've lost a third there. The Hessians came up the road, took a slap, and ran back down. Next we have the 16th Dragoons that also taken a couple of casualties. And they've got 1 fail, which is steady, so they're okay. They're in the woods. They're holding their ground, but they're getting under a bit of pressure there. Okay, we're just going to review the British turn 3 or 4, I'm not sure now, I've lost track of time. Over here on their left, you can see the commanders had a meeting there, and they managed to get 1 reroll. They moved up the 64th and shot at the column just coming on by the corn patch. They didn't do anything, but the guns on the hill fired and they did a casualty, which they failed to save, so they've picked up a couple of morale chits there. The 46th, you can see, is making its way through the trees slowly. So that American unit there is in a bit of trouble if it doesn't turn around and face what's coming its way. Over here, the 37th went forward and shot at the militia, and despite shrugging off the first casualty, they actually failed to save and took another casualty, so they've got a morale chit. The British guns joined in, but they didn't do anything, and the Queen's Rangers came forward and they blazed away a couple of shots and missed everything. You can see the Grenadiers sloping off to the right of the Queen's Rangers, coming forward to try and take a crack at the village. And also the Hessians have got their nerve back and they've come back up the road. The British cavalry have decided that they can either sit in the woods and get shot at and not shoot back, or come forward and engage in an uneven firefight, which they have, and they shot away and missed everything. We made the flanking rolls, and both players rolled really badly. The Americans only got 3. It was a golden opportunity for the British to make a comeback, but of course they only rolled 2. So the Americans are at 8 chit count now, so they need 1 more, and their flank march is going to turn up, which is going to be horrendously bad news for the British. So let's cross over to the American turn now and see how they get on. Okay, we'll recap the American turn. They had only a couple of morale checks to do. This unit here failed its by 1, so it couldn't move forward, but it could change formation, so it expanded out into line and shot at these guys this turn. Didn't do any damage. These lads here managed to turn around and form a line ready to face the 46 coming through the trees there. The commander here had to change their heart and turn the French around and move them back into the centre, because they can see these guys here are coming forward to a threat, and there's only the militia standing in their way, and we all know what happened to the last militia that stood up to a charge. Over here, I'm learning pretty quickly that 2-boot dribblers are not good. He's tried to give this guy some more re-rolls and he failed again, so he hasn't actually helped at all, that commander. He's just letting the battle unfold by itself. The 2nd Maryland in the churchyard took a base off the Queen's Rangers and has left them with a 2 dice morale check for the beginning of the next turn. And over here, these rifle arm guys cracked a shot in at the 16th Dragoons. Something I probably didn't do the first time I fired. These rifles can only shoot once a turn, but for every casualty they get, they actually put down 2 morale markers. So I've got that right this turn. So we'll try and bring on the reserve. Yep, and that comes on, and we'll check the morale clock, and that goes down 6 this turn. So the Grenadiers have gone in. You can see the dice rolls here. The Americans rolled double ones. What a disaster. So there's no fight. The Americans just broke and run. So they're gone. It's the second one that's run off the pitch. They don't really like the bayonet yet, obviously. That's a complete disaster for the Continental Force, and the Grenadiers are storming into the churchyard, and I don't think the Americans have got anything to stop them now. All right, so that winds up the British turn. We rolled for flank attacks, and lo and behold, the British actually won one. So right at the point when the Americans were about to come onto the table and save the day with their flanking match, the British clawed it back and won one. So they've got 1 chit in theirs, and the Americans are sitting on 8. So well done, British. You stalled the flank, which could have saved the Americans. One thing I haven't been doing, and I just went back and made a few re-rolls. Every time you shoot and you hit someone, you should roll to see if you disorder them. And on a 6, you would disorder the unit. And any unit carrying disorder loses 2 pips straight away in the movement phase until they remove it. And the way they remove disorder is they dedicate pips to rolling dice. If they roll a 4, 5, or a 6, then they remove the disorder. You can choose to just move around with the disorder on, but of course you're going to lose 2 pips every turn. So I went back and did a few re-rolls, and I didn't really roll any 6s, so it's a bit of a faux pas, but can't remember everything, I guess. Let's move to the American turn and see if they can plug a few holes. Right, it appears that I've just remembered about the disorder roll just in time, because this American unit activated. The British did an opportunity fire first, but hit nothing. The Continental troops came back with 2 devastating volleys. They inflicted 3 casualties, took a base off, put 3 morale checks on them, and rolled 3 dice, and one of them was a 6, so they disordered this unit. Over here, these boys just decided to stay put. They didn't really want to go into the trees and take the bigger unit on. Moving across into the centre, the militias got quite bold, and they manoeuvred forward and shot at the line infantry coming up, and they did a casualty, and of course I rolled a 6 again. So one minute you're not rolling 6s, next minute you're rolling too many. The guns and the Queen's Rangers and the other infantry tried to opportunity shoot. They didn't do any damage at all. The American guns actually found range on the retreating Queen's Rangers and managed to knock up a casualty there, take a base off, but they didn't disorder them. The commander has ordered the French to change direction again, and the French are rushing back to try and hold the churchyard against the Grenadiers, and these raw troops are moving up alongside the fence line to face off at the dwindling Hessian unit on the road. And right over here on the left, the firefight goes on, but nobody's hitting anybody at long range. We rolled for the time clock, and they scored a 4, so that's down to just four more turns on the time clock. Back to the British turn. Not a very productive round for the British. This unit failed in its morale check and fall back. The Queen's Rangers also rolled up a retire, so they've retired back. The British here did manage to remove the disorder off this unit and fire into the open order troops. They also fired with the guns, but they did nothing at all. Moving across to the centre, they just formed the Grenadiers into a bit of a line in case the French charge them, and at least they'll get a decent shot in. And the Hessians came back forward down the road and formed into the line and fired at the raw unit there, but failed to hit anything. The only success they really had was the cavalry cracked off a round and hit the open order riflemen out there in the field. They rolled for disorder but didn't do anything. Probably the other big success they had was they did all right in the flanking role, and they've moved up in pips now. So they actually won the flanking role by 4. So the Indians are obviously holding up the Americans, trying to get onto the table. And frustratingly, the Americans are 1 chit away from arriving, but the British have clawed it back, and now they've got 5 chits themselves. Let's move on to the American turn. This could be their last roll of the dice, because there's only 4 chits left on the game clock. So over on the flank there, the general activated his unit. They managed to crack off a round into the 64th and do another half-paced casualty, and they also rolled a 6 and disordered. They're already disordered, so they just managed to knock off another base on those. They didn't do anything by the woods. It's a bit of a stalemate there. Over here, they successfully activated, but then both the guns and these troops opportunity shot, and they actually did a casualty and they disordered them. So when they activated, they got 4 pips. They immediately lost 2 of those because they were disordered. They rolled one dice to try and get rid of their disorder, and they did. They rolled a 5, and then with the remaining dice, they cracked the volley off at the British behind the fence, but didn't do any damage. The guns failed to hit, and then the French were activated, and they used a re-roll to boost their pips, and they've gone in. So they've charged the Grenadiers. The Grenadiers are going to get 4 shots. They re-roll 2 3s and 1s because they're elite. So they hit 3 times. I think they saved everything there. So now we're going to roll falter dice to see if the charge goes in or not. Vive la France. They went in. They won the falter test by 1, and then I rolled the combat dice because they crashed in and fought a hand-to-hand. The British only did 3 casualties on the French, and they saved all of them. The French, on the other hand, did 5 casualties to the British, and they failed 2, so they lost the base, and that caused them to withdraw. They had to immediately take a morale test, and they passed. They rolled 3 dice and passed, but both units are now disordered. So the French have successfully saved the woman in the yellow frock and taken back the adjective. So all the Americans have got to do is this flank now. The roll to activate their gun is going to get 2 shots at the Hessians. It's going to do 1 hit. They didn't save it though, so they'll take a marker. Can they disorder them? No, they can't. So they'll take half a base loss, and they'll take 1 morale check counter for taking casualties and 1 for being hit by artillery. The next, he'll try and activate his raw troops, and he fails. So they're only going to get a residual pip, and they'll choose to shoot. So 3 dice. They can only re-roll 1s. Because they're raw, but that's still good. 2 saves. So they did save it. And then the riflemen also get a residual 1 pip. So they'll shoot 6 stands, re-rolling 2s, and that's a fantastic roll. They have got 5 hits, but of course the cavalry is in open order, so they'll ignore the first one, and they'll need anything but 1s, and they've rolled a 1. So they're going to take a full base off. Can they be disordered? Nope. Roll for the time clock, and we've rolled a 4, and that's the end of the game. So the flank marchers didn't get on. So we'll have a quick flyby of the battlefield, and then we'll add up the victory points and see who's the winner there. So we'll start over on the American right. They were under some serious pressure, but these boys coming onto the pitch as reserves, they took a bit of a hammering when they came on, but they actually dealt to the 64th and sent them reeling back. In the centre, in the trees there, the 46ers come forward. The problem they've got is the amount of pips it costs them to move through the trees, and once you exit the trees, you have to roll to see if you're disordered. So both units were really at a stalemate there. The British didn't want to come forward, and the Americans didn't want to dive into the bush. So they were kind of hoping the 64th would come forward and wipe the walls with that other guy, but that just didn't happen. Getting towards the centre of the Continental Line, these militia held up really well. You can see they're getting thinned out now, but they basically saw off or held up the artillery and this other line unit that's coming forward. I think they could have broke through there if they had a couple more turns, but the Americans didn't have anything to throw in the gap if that did happen. The Queen's Rangers just went forward, and then they went back just as quickly as they came forward. The Grenadiers did a good show. They took the village and saw the 2nd Maryland off, but the French came through and did a tremendous charge and pushed them back out of the village. Crossing across onto the left flank of the British, of the Continental Force, the raw units come up. The Hessians came forward and took a bit of a slap from the artillery and went back, and they've come forward again, but I mean, they've taken a lot of casualties now, and the cavalry's falling to bits over there as well. This rifle-armed unit really doing the business. And just noticing now that should have 2 casualty markers on it, because rifles can only shoot once, but if they do hit, they inflict 2 morale check counters. So that's the overall look at the battlefield. Let's go through and I'll add up the victory conditions. Victory conditions work a little bit differently here. I'll give you a couple of examples. You more or less roll d6s to gain victory points. So here's an example here. For each veteran cavalry unit lost by the enemy, you add d6 plus 1 victory points. For each raw foot unit lost by the enemy, you roll d6 minus 1 victory points. Won the flank arrival, defender adds d6 plus 1, attacker adds d6. So I went through and rolled all those dice for all categories. There's actually quite a few, and then total up the result, and then you consult the chart at the back, and the end result is the British got 25 points and the Americans got 17. So that was a difference of 8, and that totals out a 5 to 10 is a small win. The winning player's narrative is we've removed them from the field, but I suspect they will stand again at Oak Plenty. And the loser's one is the battle is lost, but we can retire in good order and with the army intact. I thank the German for the left flank success. So there you go. A small victory to the British. I hope that's given you an idea of how these rules play. They're a bit old school, I think, maybe. I'm not really sure. But they seem to flow okay to me. The only real mistake I made is for the first half of the game, I forgot to roll for disorder, and as I say, I went back and rolled for most of those units, and none of them were disordered. But I certainly made up for it in the second half of the battle because people were going disordered left, right, and centre. Yeah, so I hope that's given you a bit of an insight into a different way of fighting a battle in the American Revolution. Bit of food for thought, perhaps. And thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you later. Cheerio.